Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Ghost and Molly McGee. We're happy to be here, and we'll briefly introduce ourselves. My name is Michelle Park. I'm the art director on the show.
And I'm Kat Terada, the assistant art director.
And I'm Justin Rodriguez, the lead character designer.
Hey.
Let's get into it. So I want to start with some early development. I was actually brought on to Molly to do freelance probably 3 years ago at this point, 3.5 years ago, while I was actually at DreamWorks. And they brought this little project to me, and the only image that I saw was the image on the top left there, which was done by Alex Kerwan. And I think it was one of the few images that had even been done for the show at that time. Obviously a very early version of Molly and Scratch. And funny enough, as you can see, Scratch hasn't changed a whole lot. But when I was brought on, actually, Molly was cast as, the voice actress for Molly was actually supposed to be Black. So my images, which is the top, middle, and the bottom left one, reflect that casting choice. Ashley Birch was actually their first choice, but she wasn't available at the time. But by the time the show had been greenlit to pilot, she actually became available. So we ended up getting Ashley to do the voice. And after they recast Ashley as Molly, they ended up with some versions on the top right, which were done by Elsa Chang. As you can see, she's starting to kind of hone in on Molly's outfit. And then the bottom right versions were done again by Alex Kerwan, who was brought back after he had left Disney to do kind of a final pass on Molly. And he ended up coming up with her iconic eye shape. These are actually some character break-ins. They were done early on. They're a little bit farther along in production. These were done actually right after we started production, but right before we started episodic production. A lot of the board artists who came on, their first assignment before they were given a script to board was to draw Molly and Scratch doing fun, various things. So they let me take a crack at some of them also, and I cleaned up some of their versions and added a few of my own to hopefully be used for marketing stuff later on. The reason I included these here is because I just think it's a really great way to show Molly and Scratch's relationship. Here are some really early takes for the family. So what happened was when I came on really early on and I designed those, did those designs that you saw earlier, they were done to get the show greenlit to do a pilot. Once the show was greenlit to do a pilot, we do a pilot animatic and an animation test. So to do the animation test, obviously we had to have full designs. So the Molly's basically final design, probably about 98% complete, was given back to me, and I turned her, and then I finished off Scratch, and then I had to go about designing her family from scratch. So on the top left, we have some early dad designs. He was probably the hardest design to finally get down. You're going to hear me say this word a lot, specificity. We were working with Shane Prigmore early on. He was kind of overseeing everything, and he's hands down one of the best character designers slash artists slash story people I've ever worked with. And he kept honing in on me and saying, Justin, we've got to make it specific. And he would do this with his hands. We got to make it specific. What's specificity here? And he was really basically trying to tell me that the dad was looking too cliche. He's got his slacks on and his business shirt and his horn rim glasses. It's a little too like 50s, character, cartoon character dad. So he was probably the hardest one. And as you'll see when we get to the final version, he's completely different now. Mom was a little bit easier. The version on the far left is pretty close to what we ended up with. But when I was looking at her, I was actually looking at, because she's supposed to be Thai, I was looking at a lot of actual Thai actresses. So I would do deep searches into Thai actresses and really try to figure out you know, how I can simplify eye shapes and like try and really figure out the variety in eye shapes and how I can cartoonify them and simplify them and make them work for what we needed them to do. I actually looked at Ashley Birch's mom and Ashley Birch's grandma. She actually does YouTube videos with her mom, which is pretty cool. So I watched some videos like that. I think, I can't remember her name. There was another actress that they were thinking about casting, and I would look at her and then I would look at her mom to kind of like really do as much due diligence and research as I could as far as trying to make sure that it's specific. And then we have some early Daryls down here. He was, you know, he was not too hard to get down. He ended up changing quite a bit, but I kind of like these. And with him, I was looking at, what I try and do also is look at live action characters that kind of remind me of what this character is. And there's a character on the show Fresh Off the Boat that I was looking at, and I think I kind of like stole some of his like outfit ideas for this. Again, it's just adding this layer of familiarity and specificity to these guys. And here we have the final lineup. Like I said, Dad changed quite a bit. He's a little bit more casual now. He's wearing sneakers. He's got his, you know, collared shirt, but under a sweater. He's a little bit sloppy. His clothes don't fit quite right. He's got a receding hairline and a permanent like 5 o'clock shadow, which, you know, I think lends a little bit of reality and again, kind of this familiarity to him. As you can see, Mom kind of stayed the same, just adding some of our stylistic elements in it that, you know, we figured out as we went along. Daryl, you can see some of the hair shapes are kind of this similar to what we did before. Wearing a lot of layers, you know, wearing his slides, all of that stuff kind of adds this uniqueness to their character, I think. And then we've got Grandma Nin, who's one of my favorites. And the necklace she's wearing is based on actual Thai jewelry. So these are some of the model sheets I did. I've always wanted to create model sheets like this, and honestly, I never knew if I could pull it off. And I think I did a pretty good job. I used to pour over Xerox copies of old model sheets that like my teachers would give me that they, you know, came across from their teachers and from studios they had worked at and stuff like that. And I used to practice and draw over pages that go around the internet and stuff like that all the time. And TBA is kind of known for their great model sheets, and I'm glad that I got to kind of add to that legacy a little bit. This really just comes down to getting to know the character as best you can. You're really trying to break the model and see what problems arise, and it's really just a stress test to see when you start boarding it and animating it and designing it and doing special poses, like what are the problems that are going to arise? And when does she not look right anymore? When does it become ugly? When does the model break too much, you know? So it's really important to kind of do these for the board artists and for the animators, and even for me and the other designers to kind of like keep this stuff in mind. As the lead character designer, I kind of see myself as I'm the kind of keeper of her design and Scratch's design. So any problems that people come up to me with, like I should always be able to know how to fix it or draw what they want to draw, you know? So these really help me also. And Kat's gonna talk about some backgrounds.
These are some of the earliest attempts at figuring out the McGee house. When defining the style for our show, we reference artists such as Julia Sarda, Paula Escobar, Peter Placencia, and Chris Sasaki. There are many talented artists that helped out during development that set the tone for the entire McGee universe. Drake Brodall and Wendy Park, our previous art director and assistant art director, Mariam Safadi, Ivan Aguirre, Avner Geller, Sam Bosma, and Brian Woods, just to name a few. When designing the McGee house, we wanted to avoid the typical haunted house while incorporating a subtle coffin shape. With that in mind, we came to our final result on the next slide. A major theme in our show is the idea of things being a work in progress. The McGee house is just one example of that. It feels lived in and has character, but also needs some inhabification from our very own Molly. Here are some of the earliest backgrounds on our show, the McGee kitchen and living room. Much like the exterior, the structure of the house is old and has abundance of character. The furniture looks antique, possibly passed down or bought used. The house is rich with pattern and mismatched styles, and there are hints of Thai decor sprinkled throughout. These are all things that tell you who the McGees really are. The next slide shows Molly's room before she moves in. To keep with the theme of being a work in progress, it felt only natural to place her bedroom in the attic. Again, the core foundation is there as represented by exposed beams, but some polishing, much like Molly. The next slide shows Molly's bedroom after she inhabifies the old dreary attic. The top image is an early stab at her room, and the bottom two images are the final result. Her space reflects who she is as a person. She's not the most tidy or organized, but she's extremely emotional, optimistic, and happy. Visual cues that makes the space feel happy would be the playful string lights, hanging decor, the cute pictures of puppies and sunflowers, just to name a few. If you've seen the show, you know that the dollhouse is Scratch's home. This slide shows his bathroom and bedroom. This space is super fun because the artist got to play with scale and sticker furniture. I'm not exactly sure what the backstory is, but there's a subtle nautical theme throughout Scratch's home, which is a fun little detail.
So adding a little bit more to that inhabitation, the show, like the main theme of the show has a lot of things had to do with inhabifying and the friendship. And we, as a design team, we try to show that visually. So like Kat said, you know, adding, as Molly moves in, adding elements to her room, decorating is all part of that inhabification. And for colors, you know, it starts very blend, as you see on the top left. And as the more things get added, like more saturation comes up, more color comes up. And yeah, that's how Molly inhabifies. Next slide, please. So to talk about more of Molly's props, Molly is very cheerful. She's very happy, loves cute and cuddly things. And most of her personal props are never really blend. So she likes to customize, she likes to decorate with stickers, and that we try to put that a lot in our belongings. Our prop designer, Sarah Keeley and Tara Johnson, is very good at adding those elements to their props. So here we have Molly's phone. Obviously she has some straps to it, have some strawberries in there. Kitten and puppy posters, very essential to her room. She has bunny plushes. She has a lot more plushes than this, and you see them in the show. There is her tablet with kitten cover, lunchbox, and whenever she has a journal or a notepad, she always uses her stickers, loves to decorate them. And then we have her backpack right there.
Fun fact, the cat in the poster is based on my cat, Louie.
We have a lot of those like Easter eggs throughout the show. And here's some examples of McGee family props. As you were able to see from the McGee house backgrounds that you saw earlier, they're not well off. So some of their props are not the fanciest or not the cleanest props you'll see. Just like the car that you see here, it's a little run down, and we have Molly's bike there. But obviously Molly would always decorate herself, so the bike is customized to her. The flip phone on the left top is Molly's dad's phone. That's the only flip phone that appears in the show, and you know, it's her dad's. And on the left, on the very left, you see Daryl's phone. He's actually a K-pop fan. I'm very happy because I'm a Korean and that makes me happy. And so the sticker that's on there is the K-pop artist symbol. So that's for Daryl's phone. And you will see a lot of food props in the show. There's a lot more coming in the future episodes. This is just one of the examples of the Thai dessert that you see. On the right, we see two posters. It's from an episode that they are building the band shell, rebuilding the band shell together. And this is an example of prop telling, having storytellings where, you know, Molly's trying to inhabify this town, and it's she actually made these posters, and then, you know, I thought it was a good example of the inhabifying the town.
Here we have some, these are also done kind of in development, as we call them story moments. So basically, once your show pilot gets made and we make an animation test, we were asked to make some look of picture final illustrations that would be put up while they were doing focus group testing with kids. So the kids would watch the pilot, and then they would watch the animation test, and then they would basically roll through these other like show ideas, like, would you like to see Molly get a puppy? And then they would show this image. And then, you know, like, how about Molly and Scratch decorating the town for Christmas? Or, you know, how about Scratch helping Molly win the class election? So these were actually really fun to do because we're kind of exploring what, you know, early back then we were exploring what the show could be. And here you actually see, like, there's a very early version of Andrea up on stage when she was kind of the preppy blonde girl. And we'll get into that later when we talk about Andrea. So the town of Brighton.
So I'm going to talk about the colors a little bit since we talked about the layouts. Brighton is not the most updated town in Midwest. So as you can see, a lot of the part of the town, the colors are very muted and soft. And we add a lot of textures to kind of, it really helps to show that it's unclean. On some areas, not the most updated. And when we paint, the lighting that we use on the show is not the most realistic lightings, and we tend to simplify the shapes, and we tend to simplify the lightings a lot, and not everything is lit or in shadow depending on where we want the focus to be. I play a lot with simplifying lightings and shapes on my personal work too. I have some of examples of my personal work on the next slide. So yeah, Kat is gonna be showing like some of more like backgrounds that has a different kind of colors later on. But as you can see, sometimes I enjoy using a lot of muted colors like the bottom artworks, and yeah, that's how I interpret my artwork to the paintings in the show.
Here's one of our staple locations, Brighton Main Street. It portrays another major theme in our show, which is resurrection. Brighton is a forgotten Rust Belt town with the potential to grow. Again, we wanted Brighton to feel like a work in progress, as seen through the closed signs, cracks, and potholes in the street and old storefronts. It was important to us that this town felt real and authentic. The band shell is based off of a real place in Cedar Falls, Iowa. It's a real world example of a small town that reinvented itself. It's what Brighton strives to become, so it was only fitting it found a prominent place in our show. Here's Brighton City Hall, another major location. When designing new locations that are inspired by real places, I always find it helpful to explore Google Maps and roam around the streets to find inspiration. Since our show takes place in the Midwest, I like to roam around Omaha, Nebraska, since I lived there for a brief time. The next slide shows our very own Brighton Middle School. Another way to find inspiration for locations is to use Google Images. It's important to take the time to collect references. From there, you can pick and choose elements that support the story and incorporate them into your final design. Although this exact structure may not exist in reality, there are elements of it that are. Again, we wanted our show to feel real and authentic, so the world around us is our best resource. Camp Brighton. This is one of my favorite locations in this entire show. We pulled inspiration from artists such as Chris Turnham and Willie Reel when figuring out the lush trees and intricate shrubs. The next slide shows kits I designed and used to build the forest. Because there are so many locations within this space, and we have a limited time to work on an episode, sometimes putting together a kit is a great way to save time. Each piece can be reused like a stamp, so you don't have to draw each blade of grass, leaf, or even tree. Here's an example of how I put together the kit pieces to create a key background. When designing a background, we have to design a space that works for the character's action. In this particular situation, this one design had to work for 5 major scenes, not to mention close-ups and other small views. Background design requires a lot of planning and problem solving, which to me is one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much. It's not just about drawing a pretty picture, it's also about building a functional space economically. When thinking about and designing new locations, I find it helpful to draw from my plein air studies. When painting, I like to capture the feeling of the place rather than replicate it. Since you can't paint every detail and every surface, you're forced to simplify and make design decisions. Studying from life forces you to ask questions. What is the focal point of this painting? How can I leave the eye there? What is the mood of this location? Is it dramatic or calm? If something's not quite working, how can I make it better? These are all questions you can ask yourself, whether it's your personal work or on the job.
I'm going to talk about some of Brighton's inhabitants. So I was basically asked to kind of populate an entire town really early on in the series, because the town plays such an important role, as do all of Molly's friends. And here we have some of her best friends. So we were talking about Andrea earlier and how she was kind of the preppy blonde girl. We got a note early on in the focus group testing from a little blonde girl, actually, and she's like, why are all the mean girls always blonde? She's like, I'm blonde and I'm not mean. And so we had to kind of rethink Andrea's character, which, you know, for the better, because we ended up with something that wasn't as cliche. So we started trying to ask ourselves, what is the kind of the today's version of, you know, the popular preppy person, and we thought influencer. So she's not necessarily this mean girl bully type. She's just really popular and really particular about herself and her friends. So some of the fun stuff about her design, I actually based some of her clothing off of Ariana Grande. There was a design where she actually had the big boots early on, but that was going to be a problem for animation, so we removed them. You'll notice that Andrea is the only character who doesn't have little hair flyaways. And it's because she's so particular about how she looks all the time, because she's, you know, always presenting on social media. And the blue hair was actually based on the voice actress's hair color at the time, which was this kind of ombre blue. And I thought it was really cool, and I thought it was unique. So we ended up using that hair color. And if you look at her hair shape as a silhouette, it's a ghost. So that's like little stuff that I like to kind of add into the designs, to just kind of like little Easter eggs as much as I can. And then we have Kat, who was supposed to be one of Molly's bigger friends, but as the writing kind of went on the show, she didn't end up playing as big a part as we kind of originally thought she was going to. But I still love her design, and I think she's super cute. And then we have Libby, who is Molly's best friend. she's a little more demure, she's a little more shy. So we actually had a really rough sketch early on from our storyboard supervisor, storyboard specialist, Noelle Belknap, who did a really rough pen drawing of her. And she had this cool turtleneck and this messy hair, and I really loved that. And so we gave her the turtleneck, and it ended up actually being a big story moment. So she loves turtles. She uses her turtleneck to hide inside. So it's a good example of how the design kind of started to inform the story a little bit more, which anytime we can do that, I love. And she actually never takes her turtleneck off. It kind of became a thing throughout the show that no matter what she's wearing her turtleneck underneath, because it's kind of like a safety blanket for her. And then we have Sheila on the right, who is, I think she's supposed to be Indian. She's just a really cool, cool girl that Molly's friends with. So for the Brighton middle school kids, when we started populating this school, we really wanted to make it feel real. And we wanted to highlight diversity in both race and ethnicity, but we also wanted to show diversity in interests and personality. We tried our best to play against tropes. I kind of feel like the normal high school tropes of jocks and preps and goths and all of that stuff, like from what we've learned through research, is kind of starting to go away. Kids are kind of into everything now. The football quarterbacks also in the High School Musical and stuff like that. So we really wanted to kind of play against archetypes and just make these kids kind of not stereotypical and not fit into categories, but just be kind of contemporary and cool. These are some of the Brighton School staff. We have Principal O'Connor, we have the custodian, we have Mrs. Roop, who is based on Madison Bateman, our story supervisor's actual, I think, 5th grade teacher. And I mistakenly brought up, oh, it'd be funny if she wore a different history pun t-shirt every episode she's in. And then after about 10 puns, I ran out of puns. So if you watch the first 10 episodes, she has a different pun t-shirt on, and then we start to recycle them. But I found these like weird, history pun t-shirts for history teachers on Etsy, and I thought they were really funny. So I just wanted to incorporate that. We have her wife Pam, and then we have Ms. Lightfoot. This is also a good example. These are actually pre-designs. So these are the not finished designs. So I did these based only on the script, so the board artist would have something to follow. And as you can see, they're at varying degrees of finish, right? So sometimes I have a lot of time, and sometimes I don't have a lot of time, and that's why some of them are more messy than others. And then I think for all of these, I would provide at least 3 different choices for them to choose from, and these are the ones they ended up choosing. Here's some of the elderly people that we have that live at Brighton Hills. I've decided to include these because I really like these designs, A, and then B, I think it's pretty rare for a kids show to highlight elderly people the way that we highlight them. They play a really important part of the show, and they're not just like the butt of a joke, which I think is really great. And all the ones on the right, the top right, and then the bottom right 3 were done by Carl Cruz, who is our other character designer on the show. And they're some of my favorite designs in the whole show. We get the chance to play a lot with different stuff in the show. We have a whole K-pop group called Atomic Pink, and they're in the top right. We have a country star. We get to go back in the past. And we have like a Davy Crockett-esque character. And then, Greta Gerwig plays Greta Gerwig. So I got to design Greta Gerwig. And there's a lot more coming in other episodes. I actually had to remove a few designs because they wouldn't air yet. But it's really fun to be on a show where we get to do a lot of flashbacks and play in different spaces that aren't just bright. Here are just some other towny people. They kind of show up in the background a lot. And the reason I wanted to show this stuff is because the thing that I'm the most proud of when figuring out the style for this show is the amount of variety we're able to put into it. Early on, I wanted to make sure that we didn't have a show style that would pigeonhole us designers into only using a certain type of eye shape or only using certain types of body shapes, you know? And I think we accomplished that pretty well. You know, the way that the thing that is the style of the show for Molly is the way that it is drawn and not necessarily the shapes and the things that we're using. And this is some of my personal work, and like Kat, all of this observing from life really informs what we do on the show. It makes our characters feel authentic and real and like you know them. And the thing that made me good at that is cafe sketching. You know, pre-pandemic, I would go at least 3 times a week and I would sit at a coffee shop and just draw everybody that went through. And what that does is, you know, I can, you know, I have this library of hairstyles and glasses shapes and hats and, you know, whatever that I can kind of apply to characters that, you know, show up, right? So.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the characters in depth. So, you know, Justin showed you briefly on Libby, who is Molly's best friend. She is shy, she's an introvert, and loves turtle, which everybody loves about in our crew. And so I wanted to show some of the background that is related to Libby. We have her bedroom on the left. She loves to read. She loves to write journals. So, you know, you'll find her reading a book in that location. And on the middle, one of the episodes is about her bat mitzvah. So it's funny because the party that she planned she did not want tons of guests for her party. Main thing she wanted to she just wanted to invite essential people. And the prop on the bottom right, you know, her guest list says Molly with a heart. I think that says a lot about her. And you'll find out when Molly steps in, and then, you know, there's a miscommunication between them. So I recommend you guys, you know, check that episode out. And in visually, we sometimes story tells itself that, you know, Libby is more of an introvert and shy. She likes to hide sometimes, and we sometimes like to show that visually as well, where we see on the top right, you know, in that scene, she's hiding in a room, and we intentionally, you know, kind of focus the lighting of where she will be in the middle of that floor, you know, away from other people. On the bottom left, she is crafty, but in a little different way than Molly is. She likes to write her journal, and she likes to write things that she observes, and she would kind of decorate her journal based on what she sees rather than just being it cute and, you know, cuddly. So she has that whole craft box on the left. You'll see a lot of her version of crafting throughout the episodes. And we have Andrea. She is a social media star, rich, and can be over the top sometimes, but in a different way than Molly is. Because she's more of like, she needs to be presentable all the time. On the top left, it's a part of the prop where we see that she's on live. So you have the view count on the top right, you know, you can tell that she's popular. And her tablet looks very expensive. And the makeup vanities and the chair on the right is when when characters are supposed to perform to film a horror video, and instead, Andrea decides to take it away, and she is doing a makeup and then turns into a whole different genre. On the bottom, it's a part of the prop in the background from a talent show episode. And if you look closely on the prop on the left, Andrea just writes the name on top of other characters. It kind of says about her personality there. And she can be over the top, where she would turn that whole stage into her performing stage, promoting her parents' company. So that says about Andrea.
The ghost world. The ghost world resembles our memories of real places. Much like our memories, edges of buildings fade and details are forgotten. It's only the important parts of our memories that remain clear and solid. And I think a major inspiration for the ghost world was artist Paul Julian. The next slide shows some early sketches I did to explore the possibilities of the Ghost Council Island. I played with the idea of using Gothic architecture and tried to push the silhouette. In the next slide, you'll see the final Ghost Council Island. The podium itself was inspired by brutalist architecture and was designed to feel cold and oppressive, to have no life whatsoever, which is very fitting for the chairman and his ghost council.
And the Ghost Council. So you'll notice the difference between shape language between the people and the ghosts. The people tend to be a little bit sharper and use like concave lines, whereas the ghosts tend to be a little bit softer and use convex lines. They're more traditionally cartoony than the humans. Their eyes are jammed together, they overlap, they have huge noses and big mouths. And that's really to increase the humor and allow the animators in the animation studio to play with, the squash and stretch ability of the ghosts, because they're not very anatomically correct. You can really push, their acting and stuff. And it's also like, inherently takes all of the scary out. And then we have the chairman on the far right, who, is based, they told me to about like a or something that has no life and no soul and is just imposing and scary and kind of empty. So his design is actually extremely simple. It's just black on black with an outer glow. And then his cape flows constantly in like this ever-ending flame. And then his mask is shaped a little bit like a skull to kind of bring in that feeling of death and scariness. So here are some of the Ghost World inhabitants. Obviously not as scary as the chairman. On the left, we have Scratch's best friend, Jeff. And then we have, it's a funny story, like I had to take some of these out because they show up later, but basically the entire crew designed their own ghost sonas. And we designed those and actually ended up putting them in the show. So this one, our board supervisor, Noelle, did of herself, and we cleaned it up and put it in the show. And it's one of my favorite designs out of all of them. Again, we get to play with historical figures. So we have President Taft and George Washington. And then we have the little guy that you saw earlier, who is the ghost of the little old man. He doesn't die, don't worry, Scratch saves him. And then we have the bouncer, and then we have Julius Caesar. And when I initially did the early sketches, I put the knives in his back, and I didn't think that we would get away with it, and we somehow did. And then we even have ghost animals like this ghost bear. Michelle?
Ghost colors are also different, slightly different visually from a human world. As you can see, all the ghost colors are towards the cooler side versus the human world. The characters can have more freedom in color. And on the bottom, you'll see that human world has a lot more warmth to it. And in the ghost world, it's a lot more cooler and ghosty and dark. For the ghost, we have an invisible mode. If you watch the shows, Scratch and other ghosts switch back and forth from their normal mode and invisible mode. Basically, when they want to hide from people, they turn transparent. And I think Mercury did a really good job of warping when they're in the ghost invisible mode. Like they warp the inner part of the ghost, and it's visually very amazing. Here's some of the examples of the ghost props. They're also slightly transparent in opacity, just like the other ghosts. And we like to keep them mostly monochromatic. We try to use the cooler colors mostly. And they also have an invisible mode where it's matching so that it's more of a clear side. And Kat will show some examples of the backgrounds from song sequences and special scenes that from our show.
I wanted to show off some of these fun designs, many of which are from song sequences or a character's imagination. In these instances, we have the freedom to break our own rules and experiment with different styles. And Michelle is going to elaborate a little bit more on some of them.
Yeah, song sequences where we have the most freedom, like stylistically. So we have a freedom to just come up with anything, any like totally different style and locations that characters can jump around. This song is from Bat Mitzvah episode, so it's showing how Molly is imagining what the Bat Mitzvah is going to be. So we try to make it magical, and then we use some paper cutouts. So yeah, that's the one example of the song sequence. And next song sequence, we have a more of a storybook look to it. I think at the time the reference was we looked at a couple of references, which was Julia Sarda, Bridget Berger, and this is another example of how we come up with different styles for the song. And color cards come in very handy for our shows, wherever we want, like where we have a special moment that emphasizes the character, or if there's a shocking moment or any parts from a song sequence. And it's a huge part of our show. And here's a couple of varieties of the different looks of our color cards.
Now for some spooky stuff. These were some of the paintings I did as pre-design for the episode Monumental Disaster. So basically the ghost gets really angry and causes and becomes a giant tornado. So I was playing around with some of the idea of at first that the ghost would just become really large and the tornado would wrap around him. And then we kind of changed our minds and decided to make him more of an anthropomorphic tornado. This stuff is super fun because, you know, whenever you're asked to make something actually scary in a kid's show, kind of the sky is the limit. We have Hal and Harriet here, which I did some pre-designs for that were kind of lost to my computer at work when we started working from home. But the one that remained is the one on the left, and that's the one they ended up choosing anyway. So it's just fun to kind of break that style. And, we kind of come up with this idea that these ghosts are almost phantoms. So they're different than the normal ghost world inhabitants. Like these ghosts are, kind of missing something or have something to right on Earth, that they aren't, like the cute cuddly ghosts. There's something wrong with them. They're scary. So super fun to do. And then of course, whenever Scratch gets angry or upset or wants to scare people, he can definitely break his form. And the idea behind this is whenever, he wants to scare somebody or gets angry or whatever, he basically starts to lose control of himself, and he can't hold himself together. So he starts melting and warping, and that's how you get some of these poses.
And melting and warping applies to the backgrounds too. Drake Burrell and Wendy Hart's, they've been art directing since development, and here they come up with this really cool idea of like warping these backgrounds and like playing with the super crazy colors. And I think they collaborated with Mercury really well. And the background actually warps while the scare mode is happening. And we also apply different colors on the characters. And you'll see a closer version of the scare warp on the next slide. And yeah, I think this is the very important part of our show, and that makes the show really cool. So
yeah, another cool thing about these, I don't know if you know this, Michelle, but all the textures, the painterly textures, Drake did traditionally and scanned in and made brushes out of the textures. So all of those textures are unique. And when we first did them, they were just placed on top of the background, and Mercury actually took them and separated them from the background and started animating them, and really did such a great job with them.
Yeah, looks awesome. Well, that's the end of our presentation. I hope everybody liked it. And we have a Q&A after this, so I'll see you guys in a minute for that. Thank you, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Hello again. I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation. We'll just quickly introduce again. This is Michelle. And we're on, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and I'm Kat.
I'm Justin.
Yeah, and we're here on live for Q&A. And since we are pretty short on time, let's jump right into the questions. So first question is, what do you typically look for in a portfolio when you're hiring artists?
So it depends on what position specifically.
Right.
At least my background is in background design. So what I look for, is the technical skills of perspective and being able to do multiple angles of the same location, and also placing the characters in that space. On top of being able to do multiple different styles and that kind of thing.
I think for character design, I look for solid drawing, I think, is first and foremost. Like, you have to be able to do the job. So solid turnarounds and special poses and stuff like that. But on top of that, I really look for somebody who has a unique point of view and a unique voice, like somebody that's going to kind of inspire me as the show goes along. And I think our character designer, Carl Cruz, is a good example of that. He really, actually, whenever he turns stuff in, I'm like, oh, okay, like I also have to step up and do my best. So.
Yeah, I think on the color side, definitely a knowledge and like a capability of doing different sort of lightings, like different direction and different colored lightings. Like if you're capable of switching the time of the day, things like that, and how you could create a mood visually, depending on the story. So those are the things that we look for in the portfolio.
Yeah, one more thing I just remembered for location and props is your ability to tell a story or describe the character through the space.
I think that kind of applies to like all departments, like a lot of departments too, right? Like character does too, and like so is the color. Like it's how you can visually tell a story without the without the dialogue or anything.
Yeah, like the specificity thing that I brought up. It's huge. Like, who is this? I should be able to tell who that character is in like a single image by what they're wearing. Like they're not just wearing a generic shirt and jeans. It's what are they wearing? What does their jewelry look like? What kind of shoes are they wearing? A lot of people just draw Chucks, on characters, and it's there's so many different shoes out there, so.
Right. All right, next question. What advice do you have for an artist just graduating college looking for their first job? You guys have any suggestions?
I would say like networking is huge. It's hard to do a lot of the times, and I know a lot of artists are kind of introverted, but I think networking in the sense of kind of inserting yourself in the community that you want to be in, whether it be via Instagram or Twitter or Twitch or whatever, commenting on other artists' work that you admire or that you like, and then engaging with them on like social media and stuff, in this kind of post-COVID world, is a good way to kind of get people's attention and kind of, like I said, build the community.
Yeah, I think what helped me was networking and finding a mentor, like someone I can just bombard with questions and like get their feedback and, just get their honest opinion. And, when I first moved to LA without a job or anything, I joined like the Weekend Warriors to paint. You meet a lot of people there. I took CDA classes. I think just meeting people, asking questions, and just persevering, because sometimes it gets discouraging.
It definitely does.
Yeah, but with time and effort, and a little bit of luck, it'll happen.
Yeah, I think we're all in the same page there. Like networking is always a huge part of getting a job in the industry. And yeah, just like online portfolios, we look at them all the time, when we are trying to find somebody who are right fit for the show. And it's less about seeing the portfolio in person for sure.
Yeah, even on Instagram, like if I see someone's artwork, someone's post, I'll save it. Like I think just getting your work out there, even if you're like, I don't know, like, just getting your work out there, I think is really important.
For sure. Next question. What episodes are your ghost sonas in?
When do there's a big episode coming up that takes place in the ghost world. I think it's the first one of the first season, and that's where they all start to show up, because we had to do like 20 incidental ghosts, and I just kind of like crowdsourced my job to everybody else on the crew. But I think it's I don't know when it's going to air.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Dates, honestly. So yeah.
Yeah,
later.
I came
like the last third, I think.
Yeah, I came later on the first season, so I don't think my ghost sona exists, but maybe in the future.
We'll have to put.
We need to make it.
For sure.
Yeah. What else? We got 3 minutes. We'll find another question. What is the difference between story moments and concept art?
I think in this instance, in the presentation instance, it was just like story moments were a very like specific thing that we had to create for the testing. And then concept art is kind of the general term for creating art that kind of inspires the show. But I think they kind of are basically the same thing.
Yeah, I feel like story moments is under the umbrella of concept art.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a very specific part of the concept art phase, I feel like.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, one more. What is the most difficult process during the art direction of the show? I would say it's a lot
Meeting.
about management rather than like actual artwork part. So there's a lot more people to manage and a lot of artwork to look at. So it ends up being a lot of meetings throughout the day. And sometimes Kat and I are just stuck in the meetings, like morning to evening. And yeah, I guess that would be the most difficult thing. What about you, Kat?
I think remembering everything, like
That's true.
remembering, oh, I have to leave this space open for that one time the character picks up something there.
Yeah.
Just remembering all the things, I think.
Yeah, and there's a lot of planning involved too. Yeah, like we have a meeting that we go through like each scenes of the episode and just call out, like props that are needed, characters and backgrounds that are needed, and we plan out which space needs to be open, like what prop needs to be designed. Oh, they touched this one thing, we got to prop that out. So it's a lot of planning involved for sure.
I think the hardest thing for me, I'm not an art director, but part of the reason I don't know if I want to be an art director is the attention to detail that you guys have is insane. I forget stuff all the time, like, oh, Molly's bracelet. It's like, oh yeah, okay, got to put that in there. And then just because I'm going so fast, the details are so hard for me to keep track of.
Yeah,
I'm a little anal. That's my personality, so I think it works out.
I think we're on time. We're out of time. But thank you everyone for joining our panel. I hope you guys continue to enjoy this show. There are a lot more artwork and exciting stories to come.
It's on Disney on Saturday mornings, right? And then first 5 episodes I think are up on Disney Plus already.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out yet, go check it out, please. And I hope everyone have a great weekend and have a good Thanksgiving. Bye.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.